You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, and you're not. On any other day, I would face a crisis. What am I going to start with? The Dodgers trade or the Lakers trade? Either choice would be right, but it would be very hard to determine which one to start with. The thing is, though, I've said for a while now that the first part of this show would be basketball. The second part would be baseball. So with that in mind, I have to start with the Russell Westbrook trade. In a weird way, it's a good thing that the Nets and Lakers didn't meet in the NBA Finals. The reality is, it just wouldn't be as good. If the Nets and Lakers were to match up this year in the NBA Finals, you'd have Harden not at 100%, you'd have Kyrie not at 100%, and you'd have Anthony Davis not at 100%. LeBron may or may not be at 100%. If they meet next year, that has the potential to be one of the greatest finals in NBA history. Let's assume for a minute that all of these guys are at 100% health-wise. I understand that that's a big assumption, but you can't tell me that they won't be at 100%. You'd have Kevin Durant going up against LeBron James for just the second time in an NBA Finals. Think about the great rivalries that we've had in the NBA. Magic Bird, Russell Chamberlain. They all matched up multiple times in NBA Finals. LeBron and Durant, probably the two best players of this era, have only met once. You'd have the Thunder Big Three going at it in an NBA Finals. Durant and Harden versus Westbrook. Kyrie going up against LeBron in an NBA Finals. 4 MVPs going at it. The two biggest media markets in this country. New York City versus Los Angeles. The 20th anniversary of the 2002 Finals when the Nets got swept. The publicity writes itself. Anyone with at least a remote interest in basketball would stop everything that they're doing to watch that series. If you're going to have two super teams going at it, have a year where you don't have super teams. I mean, assuming it's Nets-Lakers next year, Adam Silver can say, yeah, you know, we have these ungodly assemblages of talent going at it this year, but last year it was Bucks Suns, small markets. None of those guys were signed in free agency. we had the best of both worlds. It was kind of funny. My buddy Nick texted me. And he said, Jacob, kiss your title hopes goodbye. You're not beating this Lakers team. It's going to be really tough. I'll say that. Nets-Lakers next year could go 7 games. The cheapest tickets will probably go for thousands of dollars. The thing is, though, you've got to get there first. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, Jacob, you're the biggest Nets homer there is for saying what I'm about to say. But it's the truth. Okay, I promise I'm not saying this as a Nets fan. I don't think there's any guarantee that the Lakers make the NBA Finals. I think the Nets have a much better chance of making it than the Lakers do. You watch the big three on the Nets play together, their games perfectly complement each other. You've got Harden distributing, you've got Kyrie doing his thing, you've got Durant drawing doubles, hitting tough mid-range jumpers. People were concerned about an alpha dog mentality. The other two were going to get upset at the guy who took the last shot. I promise you, that never happened. With the Lakers, you're going to get that. LeBron and Russell Westbrook? Those two guys are going to kill each other. Those two guys are probably the most tenacious players in the NBA. You're going to have them battling over rebounds. You're going to have them battling over who's going to bring the ball up the court. You're going to have them battling over who's going to take the last shot. There's a real chance that these two guys kill each other. You gotta realize, when Russell Westbrook plays with other alphas, it doesn't end well. Kevin Durant couldn't wait to get out of Oklahoma City. It didn't work with Paul George. It didn't work with Carmelo Anthony. It didn't work with Chris Paul. It didn't work with James Harden. It didn't work with Bradley Beal. The reality is, Russell Westbrook is happiest when he is, by far and away, the best player on the team. He's happiest when he can get a triple-double every night. The reality is, he doesn't care about winning. He just wants his stats. There's no question about that. His game isn't conducive to winning. There's a reason that Russell Westbrook, one of the most dominant players in NBA history, has never won an NBA title. There's a reason that this guy, who's averaged triple-doubles in 4 of the last 5 seasons, has only won 1 game in the finals his whole career. His game isn't conducive to winning. He isn't willing to sacrifice his stats for the betterment of the team. You know who is? The big three. There were games where Durant took a back seat. There were games when Kyrie took a back seat. James Harden, after averaging over 25 points a game in the last 8 seasons, put up just 24.6 points per game for the Nets. This is the right move by the Lakers. You've got LeBron signed for the next 2 seasons. you've got Anthony Davis signed for at least the next 3 seasons. In 24-25, he has a player option. You owe it to them to do everything in your power to put together a title contender. Make no mistake about it. The Los Angeles Lakers roster 24 hours ago wasn't anywhere close to being as good as the Brooklyn Nets roster. Now, the two of them are really close. I mean, who's better? Kevin Durant or LeBron James? You ask 100 different NBA fans, it's going to be really close to 50-50. Who's better? James Harden or Russell Westbrook? Same thing. Who's better? Kyrie Irving or Anthony Davis? Same thing. I don't know who we're classifying as the second best player. I'd put Westbrook ahead of Davis. But if you wanted to put Davis ahead of Westbrook, I'd listen to you. Whatever way you slice it, the comparisons are razor thin. The only way to truly determine who's better is in a 7-game series. I can hear it now. My father's going to say, "Why aren't you watching the Yankees game?" It's like, Dad, this is one of the greatest NBA finals we've ever had. I'm watching this. For anyone with even a remote interest in basketball, it's appointment television. I just hope that both teams get to the NBA finals. If I'm looking at it as a basketball fan, I want Nets-Lakers. If I'm looking at it as a Nets fan, I don't want to go up against the Lakers. Not because I don't think the Nets can't beat them, but whoever else the Nets go up against in the West, the Suns, the Clippers, the Nuggets, etc., it's going to be easier. As for how the Wizards will move on from this, for the love of God, just trade Bradley Beal, okay? Please. Just blow this thing up. Stop trying to rebuild around him. Stop trying to retool the roster so he can win in DC. It's not going to work. He's never going to win a title in DC. If he spends his whole career with the Wizards, he'll be mentioned in the same breath as guys like Reggie Miller, Patrick Ewing, and Karl Malone. Great players, incredibly dominant, could never win the big one. I mean, for God's sake, Beal's never even made it to an Eastern Conference Finals. At least Damian Lillard has made it to a Western Conference Finals. Blow this thing up, please, for the good of the NBA. I actually just had a thought. I wonder if the Wizards would be interested in a Joe Harris trade. Let me go in the NBA trade machine right now. Let's see if I can make this work. Bradley Beal for Joe Harris and DeAndre Jordan works, according to the NBA trade machine. You want Cam Thomas? You want Day'Ron Sharpe? You want Kessler Edwards? I'd do it. The Wizards wouldn't. No way on earth would the Wizards do that deal. Nets don't have any picks to offer. But I really want the Wizards to trade Beal. In all seriousness, please, please, please trade Bradley Beal. Blow that team up. Alright, now let's get into the draft itself. The first pick that really stood out to me was the Grizzlies taking Zaire Williams. Here's a guy who I had 24th on my big board In the mock draft that I did with Nick, we had him going 26. He gets taken in the top 10? That made no sense to me. Williams did not have a good offensive game last year at Stanford. You're betting on potential here. In the top 10, you don't want to do that. Look, he's a really good defender. I liked Williams. I had him as a first rounder. You can't take a guy like this in the top 10. This is a potential pick. And I've seen these kids get taken in the top 10 based on potential, and it doesn't work. Dante Exum, Frank Ntilikina. I'm not saying that Zaire Williams is going to bust like those guys did, but the Grizzlies had a golden opportunity to add a really polished player to a roster that's ready to take the next step. They didn't do it here. At 12, the Spurs really shocked everyone by taking Josh Primo. You can definitely include me in that group. He's a guy who I had 25 on my big board. Nick and I had him going 28. Best case scenario for Primo, he's just a 3-and-D guy. There were better talents available. Jalen Johnson would have been better. Keon Johnson would have been better. Far be it from me to disagree with Greg Popovich, but Primo's going to take a while to get better. He was actually the youngest player in this draft. You can't take that guy in the lottery. If you're a playoff team like the Grizzlies or the Pacers or the Warriors, a team with a real chance of doing something in the playoffs, I could understand betting on Primo's potential. With the Spurs, I don't get it. You're going to have to wait a while to see this kid turn into anything. He strikes me as the kind of guy who's going to bounce around the NBA for like 5 years. And then I'm going to talk about him signing somewhere, and I'm going to say, I still think this guy has some potential. There was a trade involving the 22nd overall pick. It's kind of funny. That was the first rounder that the Wizards got in the Westbrook deal, but they flipped it to the Pacers for Aaron Holiday and the 31st overall pick, which they later used on Isaiah Todd. With the 22nd overall pick, the Pacers took Isaiah Jackson. But I want to talk about the Wizards trading for Holiday. Unfortunately, this basically signals that they're not going to blow it up. They should. I stand by that. I really want them to. But they're not going to. They're still trying to go for it. I mean, maybe you can flip Holiday. Maybe you can flip Kyle Kuzma. Maybe you can flip Montrezl Harrell. Maybe you can flip KCP. It's what you should do. Let me ask you this. You look at the Wizards roster, okay? Is that team making any noise in the playoffs? Come on. They've got a good backup point guard in Holiday now. Whoop-de-freaking-do. I mean, I understand the logic of making the playoffs at all costs. The NBA has fostered an environment where you should either position yourself as a title contender or a lottery team. There's no middle ground. That's wrong. I get that. But that's the nature of the beast. My advice hasn't changed for the Wizards. Blow things up. Please. With the pick right after Isaiah Jackson, the Rockets made one of the steals of the draft, taking Usman Garuba at 23. This guy was one of the best defenders in the draft. Doesn't take any plays off. He's very raw, but there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of upside there. And you can put Garuba in for like 15 minutes, and he'll hold his own. He was the 16th player on my board. I had him going 9 in the mock draft. He ended up going 23. The Rockets got a rich man's Kenneth Faried. Give them a ton of credit. 2 picks later, the New York Knicks made their first pick in the draft. They had 2 first-rounders, 19 and 21. They traded down twice. They then decided that they wanted to use one of their picks, but they really messed it up by taking Quentin Grimes. There's no planet where Quentin Grimes should have been that pick. Here's a guy who Nick and I had going 40. I had him as the 35th best player in this draft. With Jared Butler sitting there, you have Sharif Cooper sitting there. You have Jaden Springer sitting there. Bones Highland is there. All of those guys would have been better options than Quentin Grimes. I understand that the Knicks took a point guard a little later in the draft, and I'll get into that, because I did like that pick. But the Knicks really reached for Grimes here. He wasn't the best player available. He didn't really fill a big need for the Knicks. He reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Mudiay. No Knicks fan alive will say that he wants the next Emmanuel Mudiay. I mean, I'm very concerned how he's going to fit in Tom Thibodeau's system, because Grimes is not a good defender. Solid offensively. Had a great combine. But I did not like this for the Knicks. And I'll say this. I saw a tweet from an NBA insider, I don't remember who, that said that the Knicks trading down worries some executives. What do they have up their sleeve in free agency? Come on. I'm not saying that the Knicks are going to get no one in free agency. I actually think they'll get a couple really good players. But if you're telling me that the Knicks moved down just because they think they may get some big free agents, come on. We've seen that movie before. With the last pick in the first round, the Grizzlies really shocked the world again. They took Santi Aldama, a guy who Nick and I didn't even have being drafted. I had him as the 62nd best player on my board. If you wanted to take him in the late second round, I would have had no problem with it. He dominated the Patriot League, make no mistake about it. He has a good shot. He's comfortable with the ball in his hands, but he's got to put on a ton of weight. He's built like a pencil. He's not very smart. He's not a good defender. The Grizzlies had 2 really big opportunities to improve their team in the first round. Instead, they blew it. You can't tell me that James Bouknight and Jared Butler wouldn't have been a better draft for the Grizzlies. In fact, with this pick, you could have taken Kessler Edwards or Charles Bassey, and I would have been okay with it. Now let's get into the second round. And now it's time to talk about Miles McBride. This pick made a lot of sense. Like I said, the Knicks need a point guard. They got a really good point guard in the second round. And in all fairness to them, they did trade down to get him. Sometimes trading down works. I mean, there's a school of thought that says you never look stupid trading down. I would disagree with that. I think if there's a player available who fills a glaring hole for you, and you're sitting in his range, or maybe a little below his range, you've got to take him. But usually trading down is a good decision. Nick and I had McBride going 25th overall. I had him as the 30th best player on my board. He fills a big need for the Knicks. Had a great combine. You sensing a theme here? Really good defender. This is a Thibodeau pick. Tibbs is going to love this guy. I mean, I'll tell you, I wouldn't be upset if the Knicks started McBride on opening day. I also wouldn't be upset if they signed Kyle Lowry, because that's who McBride really reminds me of. A poor man's Kyle Lowry. The pick after that was traded by the Hornets to the Pistons for Mason Plumlee. With that pick, the Pistons took JT Thor. So JT Thor is now a Piston, and Mason Plumlee is now a Hornet. Even trade for both sides. It makes perfect sense. The Pistons replace an older Plumlee. It's weird to think of Plumlee as an old player, because I remember when he first came into the NBA as a member of my beloved Nets, but he's 31. He's not getting any younger. The Pistons replaced an older player with a younger player. I loved Thor coming out of Auburn. A stretch 4. I thought he was the 28th best player in this draft. I had him going 23. He reminds me a lot of Al-Farouq Aminu. To replace Plumlee with Thor made a ton of sense. And for the Hornets to add a really good center made sense too. What was their Achilles heel last year? Not having a true center. Cody Zeller isn't anything special. Bismack Biyombo's a solid rebounder, but that's about it. Plumlee's going to fill a big role on the Hornets. That's a match made in heaven. If you were to write down on a piece of paper what the Charlotte Hornets really needed, it would look a lot like Mason Plumlee. Job well done by both teams. Jared Butler was finally taken at 40th overall by the Utah Jazz. It's kind of scary if you stop and think about it. The Jazz finished with the best regular season record in the NBA, and they just added a lottery-level talent in the second round. I had Butler going 11 in my mock draft. I thought that he was the 18th best player in this draft. For the Jazz to get him at 40 is incredible. I understand that health is an issue. He has a heart condition. There are real questions about what his NBA future can be. But if he stays healthy, you've got a really good player on your hands. One of the best offensive players in this draft. Not the smartest player in the world, I get that. Not the greatest defender in the world. But he's strong. Finds a bunch of different ways to help his team out. Played really well in the big dance. Sometimes you've got to take the chance on someone who's as talented as Jared Butler. I understand why he fell to 40. The logic makes sense. But this guy was a lottery-level talent. Sharif Cooper's free fall was stopped by the Hawks with the 48th overall pick. I'm not sure why the Hawks took Cooper when they already have Trae Young, but you know what? If you can get a first rounder with the 48th overall pick, you worry about fit later. In the mock draft that I did with Nick, he kind of reached for Cooper at 10. I had him as the 21st best player in this draft, but I think we could both agree that he should have been taken sooner than 48. Reminds me a lot of Mike James. Very crafty, very quick, great athlete. The potential is there for Cooper to turn into something special in the NBA. Is it a guarantee? Absolutely not. He's a shrimp puff. He's 6 feet tall, 165 pounds. But I did have a first round grade on him. If you can get him in the mid-second round, that's never bad and always good. With the 53rd overall pick, the 76ers took Charles Bassey. You know what? I'll say this about Bassey. Joel Embiid has injury concerns. You can put Bassey at starting center, and obviously you'll lose something because you're missing Joel Embiid. But Bassey's a good player. He'll hold his own. Here's a guy who reminded me a lot of Clint Capella. Excellent defender. Very raw. Went to Western Kentucky. He's not a plug-and-play guy. He's going to need to spend some time in the G League to reach his full potential. But I do think that if he had to play on opening night, he wouldn't embarrass himself out there. I think he'd hold his own defensively. I think his rebounding would be good. Bassey has a solid floor, but you want him to get to his ceiling, obviously. The best way for him to do that is to spend some time in the G League. But I do think that playing with Joel Embiid will help him. I do want to spend some time talking about what my beloved Brooklyn Nets did. They made their first bit of news when they traded Landry Shamet to the Suns for Javon Carter and the 29th overall pick. It's very interesting that they would trade Shamet. I thought that him and James Harden had a good relationship. But Carter fits the Nets better. He's a dog. He's a defense-first point guard. Reminds me a lot of Bruce Brown with how he plays. Has a solid outside shot. Not great, not terrible, but you don't want the ball in his hands too much. I'll say this. Assuming the Nets bring back Blake Griffin, which is very possible, in my opinion, you can run a lineup of Carter, Brown, Joe Harris, Durant, and Griffin. That lineup has defense. That lineup has offense. That can work. You can make the argument that Carter fits the Nets perfectly. So that left the Nets with 5 picks in this draft. 27, 29, 44, 49, and 59. The rumblings on Nets Twitter was that they'd use some of those picks to move up or shed DeAndre Jordan's contract. No one thought that the Nets would use all 5 picks. But Sean Marks did. He took Cameron Thomas with the 27th overall pick and Day'Ron Sharpe with the 29th overall pick. At first, I was a little confused by the Cam Thomas pick, but then I remembered that the Nets traded Shamet. Like, that just slipped my mind. I mean, I'll say this. Thomas does remind me of Shamet. He reminds me of Lou Williams. He reminds me of Kyle Korver. He's going to be a spark plug off the bench. He's going to be able to carry an offense. He can score anywhere on the floor. Nick and I raved about him on the mock draft. The Nets replaced Shamet with a younger Shamet. That made a ton of sense. I don't know how the first thought in my head was he doesn't fit the roster. He fits the roster perfectly. That was a bad job by me on first thought. Day'Ron Sharpe is a little interesting. We heard rumors all throughout this process that the Nets really liked Sharpe. So him being taken by the Nets didn't surprise me at all. I'm just concerned about his fit on the team. See, at this very moment, you have a rotation of James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, and Nick Claxton to be backed up by Javon Carter, Cam Thomas, Bruce Brown, Alize Johnson, maybe, and Day'Ron Sharpe. You can't tell me that JT Thor wouldn't have been a better fit for this roster. Unless you're going to trade Claxton. Maybe Marks has something up his sleeve. Maybe he'll add Claxton to the Beal trade. I mean, one thing about the Nets, they now have solid big man depth. Claxton, Johnson, Sharpe, Reggie Perry. Rebounding was an issue for them last year. Size was an issue. It's why I think Kristaps Porzingis would make sense. I understand stacking up on depth, I just don't know where you're going to play everyone. It's not worth getting into the second rounders. They're probably not going to play a lot for the Nets. Those were just depth moves, roster fillers, developmental projects for the Long Island Nets. I was fine with them. I had no problem with it. I don't want to go too far in depth on guys who probably aren't going to play a lot for the Nets. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And it's time to get into one of the biggest trades in recent MLB history. Nothing's official yet, but according to multiple sources, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner are going to the Dodgers in exchange for Keibert Ruiz, Josiah Gray, Gerardo Carrillo, and Donovan Casey. An absolutely fantastic move for the Dodgers. God only knows what's going to end up happening with Trevor Bauer. I mean, his being out leaves a big hole in that rotation. You've got Walker Buehler, Julio Urias, and Tony Gonsolin. That's it. Clayton Kershaw is hurt right now. Same thing with Dustin May. May's out for the year. We know that. Kershaw is injury prone. We know that. You had to reinforce the rotation, and you added one of the best pitchers in baseball. You added a future Hall of Famer. And to add to that, you've got Corey Seager coming back any day. He's another guy who's a little injury prone. Gavin Lux is hurt right now. The Dodgers just fortified their depth. They've assembled one of the best rosters in Major League Baseball, if not the best. It's nothing short of incredible. And there's one other element to this. It came out that the Dodgers were going to trade for Scherzer and Turner last night. Last afternoon, the Padres were supposedly close to getting Scherzer. The last thing on earth that the Dodgers wanted was to see Max Scherzer in a Padres uniform. If you can keep him out of your division, you have to do everything in your power to do it. And if that means trading for him, and he fills a need anyway, go for it. And if you can also add one of the best shortstops in baseball, go for it. With everyone healthy, think about the Dodgers lineup. At catcher, Will Smith. From first to third, Max Muncy. I'm guessing Justin Turner. Trey Turner at short. And Corey Seager at third. And the outfield is A.J. Pollock, Chris Taylor, and Mookie Betts. The rotation's Buehler, Urias, Scherzer, Kershaw, and Gonsolin. How do you get any better than that? The Dodgers were sick and tired of the Padres trading for every star under the sun. They wanted a couple stars. Trading for Betts a year ago wasn't enough. You see the Padres trade for Snell, Musgrove, Darvish, and Frazier. The Dodgers can make some noise too. As it stands right now, the NL wildcard game will be at Dodger Stadium, where the Dodgers will be hosting the Padres. I don't care if you're an American League fan. I don't care if you don't watch the National League, or the only time you watch them is when your team is playing an interleague game, that's appointment television. Dodgers-Padres in the NL wildcard game is must-see TV. Make no mistake about it. As for the Nationals, I'm stunned that they're blowing things up. It's not the wrong move. I want to make that clear. It's the right decision by the Nationals to blow things up. They won a World Series in 2019. Last year, they weren't any good. You chalk that up to the 60-game joke. But this year, they've proven that their core needs to be redone. The roster that they assembled just wasn't going to get it done anymore. I didn't think the Nationals would go that route. It just didn't strike me as something in their nature. Mike Rizzo has always been very aggressive. Nationals ownership has always been very aggressive. This, to me, is almost as surprising as the Yankees selling. Obviously, the Yankees aren't selling, but if they did, the Nationals selling would almost be as surprising as that. But again, it's the right decision. You've got to commend the Nationals front office for realizing what needed to be done to set this team up for success down the line. As for the prospects that the Nationals got here, it's a fantastic haul. You couldn't have done any better. The only way that the Padres could have topped it would have been to include Mackenzie Gore. I don't think the Padres want to do that. So they get to go up against Scherzer for the next 2 months. Keibert Ruiz is now the catcher of the future. Something that he wasn't for the Dodgers. Will Smith is one of the best catchers in baseball. He's young. He's 26. The Dodgers aren't going to move on from him. Ruiz was expendable. You look at the Nationals, Ruiz fits them absolutely perfectly. He's going to be their catcher of the future. He's going to play a lot, make no mistake about it. Excellent hitter. Solid power. He's an offensive hitting catcher. You can live with his defensive drawbacks. I promise you, Ruiz is going to be in the nation's capital for a really long time. The same thing with Josiah Gray. One of the best starting pitching prospects in all of baseball. Great fastball, really good slider, solid changeup, good control. The Nationals for a long time have banked on older starters. Signing Scherzer, giving Strasburg the big contract. Signing Corbin, signing Anibal Sanchez. It's nice to see them get a younger starter. And I'll say this, with the pitching depth that the Dodgers have, you can afford to trade Gray. I understand that you can never have too much pitching, but if you have great pitching depth, it does give you the option of dealing from it. I don't mind the Dodgers trading Gray, and I don't mind them trading Gerardo Carrillo. He has fantastic stuff. One of the best sinkers I've ever seen. It's Zach Britton good. Great slider. Gets fantastic velocity. He's working on other pitches. He's going to be a starter if he can just work on his control. The thing with Carrillo is there are some scouts who view him as a future reliever because of his control issues. But his stuff is starter good. Carrillo has the potential to become a really good starter. Unfortunately, he may just turn into a reliever. Or just minor league depth if he can never control his pitches enough. All in all, this is a great trade for the Dodgers. They were this close to having to go up against Scherzer in the NL West. Now they get him on their team, and they add Trey Turner. This is the exciting thing about this deadline. We don't have a lot of teams standing pat. A lot of teams are actively trying to get better. Gotta love it. No team fits that mold better than the New York Yankees. Right after they finalized the trade for Joey Gallo, they add another lefty-hitting Italian-American in Anthony Rizzo. In exchange, the Yankees traded Kevin Alcantara and Alexander Vizcaino. According to MLB.com, Vizcaino was the Yankees' 9th best prospect, and Alcantara was the Yankees' 12th best prospect. So just to be clear, the Yankees acquired 2 power-hitting lefties and didn't give up any of their top 8 prospects, according to MLB.com. And they got the Cubs to pick up all of Rizzo's remaining salary. This is insane. You had a feeling that the Yankees wouldn't be done after trading for Gallo? I don't think anyone saw Rizzo coming. We heard Story, we heard Gray, we heard Berrios. We didn't hear Rizzo. But now, think about this lineup. LeMahieu, Judge, Rizzo, Stanton, Gallo, Urshela, Torres, Sanchez, and Allen. If you want to get really crazy, put Stanton in left, move Gallo to center, and put Voit at DH. Voit would slot in 7th, for whatever it's worth. It would go Urshela, Voit, Torres, Sanchez. To be honest with you, I'm more excited about adding Rizzo than I was about adding Gallo. Rizzo's a guy who usually hits for a solid average. He's having a bad year this year. He's only hitting .248, but he's playing for a bad Cubs team. I can overlook that. Usually he's hovering around .270. He's an excellent fielder, a 4-time Gold Glover, gets on base a lot, doesn't strike out a lot. The reality is he's very similar to Voit. Rizzo's just a lefty and a much better fielder. I mean, Rizzo's the better player. Make no mistake about that. Did the Yankees need to make this trade? The answer is no. But if you can get Rizzo without having to pay any of his salary, and you only have to give up 2 prospects that aren't in your top 8, you do it. I'll say this though, if you were going to trade Alcantara and Vizcaino. I'd have rather you added a starter. If you wanted to add a reliever, I would have been okay with that too. Instead of improving a position that was already good, improve a position that needed more help. If you deem these two guys as being expendable, fill a bigger hole. I mean, I don't think there would have been a Yankees fan alive that wouldn't have been okay with Voit being the first baseman the rest of the way. And if he gets hurt again, LeMahieu slides over to first, and Odor takes over at second. Odor's been raking recently. To go a little more in depth on the haul that the Cubs got, they added 2 good prospects. Vizcaino's going to be a starter in the majors, has a really good fastball, a good slider, and an elite changeup. He controls them all really well. And Alcantara is very fast. Very raw, though. There's a big bust chance with him. Like, that's another thing to like about this trade. Alcantara hasn't played above rookie ball. Vizcaino hasn't played above single A. So if you're the Cubs, yeah, you can afford to wait, but if you're the Yankees and you're in buy mode, you can't afford to wait on these guys. Moreover, you take a look at the prospect depth chart for the Yankees. Alcantara profiles more as a center fielder. Jason Dominguez and Estevan Florial are above him there. And Davy Garcia, Clark Schmidt, Luis Gil, Luis Medina, and Yoendrys Gomez were all ahead of Vizcaino. It's amazing how the Yankees haven't traded any blue chip prospects here. Incredible job by Cashman. I'll say this, it's all on Aaron Boone now. It'll be interesting if the Yankees miss the playoffs if Cashman survives now after pulling off these 2 great trades. He can make that case to Hal Steinbrenner very easily. Hey, I did all I could. Boone just couldn't get the job done. Let me bring in a better manager. The Yankees did make a move to improve their rotation, although it's not an earth-shattering one. They traded Jansen Junk and Elvis Peguero to the Angels for Andrew Heaney. You don't need to know anything about Junk and Peguero. Jansen Junk's last name is Junk, okay? He's not going to make it in the majors. And Peguero's a schmagegi. But Heaney makes sense. For the longest time, the Yankees have needed a true second lefty starter. Paxton's been hurt, Montgomery's been hurt. They've never had 2 lefties in the rotation for an extended period of time. Is Andrew Heaney great? The answer is no. He's 6-7 with a 5.27 ERA, but he's another lefty. He's a solid rental. I have no problem with the Yankees bringing him in. They gave up nothing to get him. It makes sense. Brian Cashman is nailing this deadline. Moving on now to the Blue Jays, trading for Jose Berrios. In exchange, the Twins are getting Austin Martin and Simeon Woods Richardson. This move makes sense for both teams. Make no mistake about it, the Blue Jays aren't out of the playoff hunt. They're only 4.5 games behind the Athletics. The Yankees are 3.5 games out. If it's not impossible for the Yankees, it's not impossible for the Blue Jays. What have they been missing for a long time? A bona fide ace. All due respect to Robbie Ray and Hyunjin Ryu, those guys aren't aces. Best case, Ryu's a second starter and Ray's a third starter. Jose Berrios is an ace. Jose Berrios is one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's 7-5 with a 3.48 ERA. He's only 27 years old. The Blue Jays are going to have him for 1.5 years. This fills a huge hole for Toronto. But the Twins can be very satisfied with the haul that they got back. Austin Martin is a 5-tool player. One of the best bats that I've ever evaluated. Great power, great speed, really good glove, really good arm. He's a true 5-tool player. Like, think about this infield for the Twins down the line. Miguel Sano, Jorge Polanco, Austin Martin, and Royce Lewis. That's pretty darn good. That has the potential to be one of the best infields in baseball. And Simeon Woods Richardson is going to be a really good starter. The Blue Jays got him from the Mets in the Marcus Stroman trade. Great fastball, great changeup. Really good slider, good curveball, impeccable control. I don't want to say that Woods Richardson has the potential to be better than Berrios, because that's a tall ask. But there's no question in my mind that he's going to be really good. This is an even trade for both sides. Moving on now to the Cubs, trading Craig Kimbrel to their neighborhood rivals, the White Sox, in exchange for Cody Hewer and Nick Madrigal. Look at it this way, Kimbrel doesn't need to move. He just may have a longer commute, depending on if he lives closer to the north side than the south side. Trading for Craig Kimbrel gives the White Sox probably the best 8th, 9th inning duo in baseball. Liam Hendricks and Craig Kimbrel. The game's over in 7 innings. It's like the stupid doubleheaders we have. I don't know who's going to close for the White Sox. They may not want to give Kimbrel that responsibility right away. Let him learn the American League a little bit. And then if you want to move him over to the closer role, you can. But I'll say this. The White Sox also have Jose Ruiz, Garrett Crochet, Aaron Bummer, Michael Kopech, Ryan Burr, Reynaldo Lopez. That bullpen is lethal. It's almost as good as the Athletics bullpen. In fact, it may be better. I would need to really think about it. It's kind of interesting, the haul that the Cubs got. They got not ready-made major leaguers from the Yankees for Rizzo. They got ready-made major leaguers from the White Sox for Kimbrel. Hewer has potential. He pitched well in the shortened season. Went 3-0 with a 1.52 ERA last year, but this year he's taken a step back. He's 4-1 with a 5.12 ERA. He can turn it around, though. I don't want to say that he can't. Nick Madrigal, I like him a lot. I think he's going to be a really good second baseman in this league for a long time. I know that he's hurt right now, but I have no doubt in his ability to bounce back. This year, Madrigal's hitting .305 with 2 homers and 21 RBIs. It's a good haul for the Cubs. It makes sense. I'm not going to knock it. But this trade makes the White Sox bullpen maybe the best in baseball. Because of that, they win it. But this isn't a bad trade for the Cubs by any stretch. Moving on now to the Cubs trading Javier Baez and Trevor Williams to the Mets for Pete Crow Armstrong. There was a rumor that came out that said that Steve Cohen wanted to make a splash. He made a splash. Think about the lineup that the Mets can put out there. McCann behind the plate. From first to third. Alonso, McNeil, Lindor, and Baez. I know that Lindor is hurt right now. You can throw Luis Guillorme in there. The outfield's a little unsettled, but it's some combination of Dominic Smith, Brandon Nimmo, Michael Conforto, and J.D. Davis. Whatever way you slice it, that's a really good lineup. I mean, I've said this before. I'll say it again. The Mets are making the playoffs. I don't think they'll make a ton of noise when they get there. I don't trust Edwin Diaz to close out games in the playoffs. But the Mets are going to win the NL East. When their owner says, let's seize upon this moment, let's make a splash, you've got to do it. I mean, Baez and Williams aren't having the greatest seasons. Baez is hitting .248 with 22 homers and 65 RBIs. He has an under .300 on base percentage. The home runs and RBIs are excellent, but he's also leading the National League in strikeouts with 131. And Trevor Williams just isn't a good pitcher. He's 4-2 with a .506 ERA. It's a little disconcerting to me that the Mets are moving on from Pete Crow Armstrong so quickly. I'm getting Jared Kelenic flashbacks. Granted, Kelenic hasn't amounted to much with the Mariners, but I'm still getting those flashbacks. I mean, he's going to be a really good outfielder in this league. He's going to be an excellent fielder, blazing speed, solid bat. This is risky for the Mets. And at the end of the day, how much better does it make them? They're not going to win their NLDS with this move. I get that the owner wanted to make a splash, but I don't like this. The Cubs win this trade. A trade that the Cubs didn't win, though, was the Chris Bryant trade. This is a heist. This is an absolute steal by the San Francisco Giants. The Dodgers and Padres have gotten all the headlines. Here are the Giants saying, wait a minute, we're the best team in baseball. We can make a run at a World Series too. So they trade Alexander Canario and Caleb Killian to the Cubs for Chris Bryant, a former MVP, a guy who fills a glaring hole for them. Because Evan Longoria has been hurt for a long time now. Bryant's hitting .267 this year with 18 home runs and 51 RBIs. I actually think he's better than Rizzo, and I think he's better than Baez. I don't know if he's better than Kimbrel, though. That's really, really tough. But it's fair to say that Bryant was the most appealing position player trade chip that the Cubs had. And the only noteworthy prospect they get is Alexander Canario? No, that's not going to work for me. All due respect to Canario, he's going to be a good player in this league. You've got to do better than that. You've got to get Marco Luciano, Joey Bart, Helio Ramos. Any one of those guys would have worked. Just Canario because Killian's a schmagegi? That's a steal for the Giants. I mean, Canario's going to be a good player. He's going to be a really good player. Incredible raw power, really good speed, cannon for an arm, good glove. He's incredibly strong. He's going to have a long career in this league. I like Canario. But he's not going to be as good as Luciano. He's not going to be as good as Bart. He's not going to be as good as Ramos. The Cubs got a really, really, really good player in Canario. They could have gotten a great one in Luciano, Bart, or Ramos. Outstanding job by the Giants. Bad job by the Cubs. All the goodwill that they engendered from me in the Baez trade, out the window. Moving on now to another former Cub. But this isn't a trade that the Cubs made. This is a trade that the Nationals are making. Kyle Schwarber has been traded from the nation's capital to the Red Sox for Aldo Ramirez. It's kind of interesting. The Yankees have coveted Schwarber for a long time. They thought of him as their future DH. Like, they wanted him in the Chapman deal. If they could have done Torres and Schwarber, they would have done it. And it brings up the question, would the Yankees have traded for Stanton a little under a year and a half later? Probably not. I mean, the Yankees wanted his power bat. It would play well in the stadium, and it's going to play well in Fenway. There's no question. The knock on Schwarber has always been his defense. He'll be the DH now for the Red Sox, so there's no issue there. And his average is really low. He doesn't get on base a lot. This year he's hitting .253. He has a .340 on base percentage. He has 25 home runs. He has 53 RBIs. He's doing everything you want him to do. This makes perfect sense for the Red Sox. And they gave up a prospect in Aldo Ramirez, who I'm not crazy about. Most people see him as a starter. I see him as a reliever. He really only has one above-average pitch. That's his fastball. He has an okay curveball. He has an okay changeup. But I think if he's really going to excel in the majors, it's going to be as a reliever. If you're the Red Sox, you give up a future reliever for a guy like Schwarber every day of the week. They saw the Yankees get better. Perhaps they had a feeling that the Blue Jays were going to do something. The Schwarber trade was done before the Berrios trade. They couldn't sit on their hands. Good move by them. Okay, now I'll go to another Cubs-White Sox trade. Has that ever happened before? Two trades between the Cubs and White Sox in a 24-hour period? I don't know. The Cubs traded Ryan Tepera to the White Sox for Bailey Horn. White Sox bullpen just gets better and better. It's kind of interesting that they went this route because their rotation has been pretty darn good. Lance Lynn's having a great season. Same thing with Carlos Rodon. Lucas Giolito's having a really good season. Dylan Cease is having a really good season. Dallas Keuchel's been good. How are you going to score any runs against the White Sox? Yankees-White Sox ALDS. That lineup versus this pitching staff. Sign me up. As a baseball fan, I'd love that matchup. As a Yankees fan, good pitching usually beats good hitting. Bailey Horn's an interesting prospect. He had Tommy John surgery when he was in junior college. The thought was that he'd be on the fast track to the majors, but it hasn't worked out that way. He's got a good fastball, solid curveball, not a great slider. He is a pit bull, though. I'll say that. He pitches with intensity. I like that. But Horn carries a high risk about him. It's possible he never makes the majors. The White Sox win this trade. Moving on now to the Rays, trading Diego Castillo to the Mariners for JT Chargois and Austin Shenton. Everyone was confused when the Mariners traded Kendall Graveman to the Astros. Jerry DiPoto said, don't worry about it, we have something else in the works. This is a pretty good something else. Diego Castillo's a really good closer. He has closer stuff. I mean, I hesitate to call him the Rays closer because they kind of use a closer by committee approach, but he does have more saves than any Ray this year with 14. He's 2-4 with a 2.72 ERA. He's a really good pitcher. The Mariners needed a closer. They got a really good one in Castillo. I don't love this trade for the Rays, but you know what? It makes sense if you want to go with a true closer by committee approach. Chargois is a solid reliever. It's taken him a while to put it all together, but it seems like he's figured it out. 1-0 with a 3 ERA. He'll fit into the Rays' mishmash bullpen. Shenton's a good contact hitter. Smart guy. Not a good defender, though. He's a man without a position. He's probably a DH in the majors. I don't know if he'll ever figure it out as a third baseman. For his sake, I'm glad that he was traded within the American League. I'll give a slight edge to the Mariners here, though. They got the better pitcher in Castillo. Moving on now to the Nationals, trading Yan Gomes and Josh Harrison to the Athletics for Drew Millas, Richard Gouache, and Seth Schumann. This is a really good trade for the Athletics. Sean Murphy hasn't been getting the job done, so adding Gomes makes a ton of sense. In fact, the Nationals had no need for Gomes because they just traded for Keibert Ruiz. As for Harrison, he can really play anywhere. He's a super utility guy. Maybe you put him at third over Matt Chapman. You use Chapman as a late inning defensive replacement. Gomes is hitting .271 with 9 homers and 35 RBIs. Harrison's hitting .294 with 6 home runs and 38 RBIs. The Athletics bolstered their lineup here. This makes a ton of sense. Good job by them in being aggressive in adding major league talent. And all they gave up was a decent catching prospect in Milas. Milas was expendable, though, because ahead of him on their depth chart, they have Tyler Soderstrom, Jonah Heim, Austin Allen, and Kyle McCann. Milas could end up topping out as an all-glove, no-bat backup catcher. I'm not in love with his offensive output. I'm not crazy about his swing, not crazy about his approach at the plate. He could make it in the bigs. I just don't think he'll be anything special. You don't need to know anything about Gouache. You don't need to know anything about Schumann. All you need to know is that the Athletics really stole Gomes and Harrison from the Nationals. Moving on now to the Rangers, trading Kyle Gibson, Ian Kennedy, and Hans Kraus to the Phillies for Spencer Howard, Josh Gessner, and Kevin Gowdy. This is a steal for the Phillies. This is a heist. Gibson's having a really good year with the Rangers. Went 6-3 with a 2.87 ERA. He made the All-Star team. Kennedy has a 2.51 ERA and 16 saves. If you were to write down on a piece of paper what the Phillies needed, it would look a lot like Gibson and Kennedy. And to add to that they're getting Hans Kraus, a guy who has the potential to be a good major league starter. Really good fastball, really good slider, solid changeup, decent control. That's a steal. I understand that the Phillies traded their number one prospect here in Howard. The thing is, though, Howard hasn't put it all together in the majors yet. Did not do well in the shortened season, has not pitched well this year. He's 25. He's running out of time to put it all together. To be honest with you, I'm selling Spencer Howard stock. The potential was there. I just don't think it is anymore. The Phillies did an excellent job of selling high on him. This is a steal for them. They easily win this trade. The Phillies are only 3.5 games behind the Mets in the NL East. I do think the Mets are going to win the division, but the Phillies are going to make them work for it. Moving on now to the Pirates, trading Richard Rodriguez to the Braves for Bryce Wilson and Richard DeVito. I don't like this move for the Braves. Ronald Acuna getting hurt sunk their playoff hopes. It didn't matter what else the Braves did. I said this before. They weren't going to make the playoffs. Why are you giving up Bryce Wilson? Why are you giving up a really good young starter for a closer who can't help you this year? In the future, I'm fine with it. Now, it makes no sense. I mean, I like Wilson a lot. He throws 3 really good pitches, fastball, slider, changeup, has an okay curveball, really good control. I would not trade him here. It makes no sense. I understand that Rodriguez is under team control for not just the rest of this season, not the season after, but the season after. But you trade for him later. It doesn't make sense to trade for him now. The Pirates were in no rush to trade him. If they didn't trade Brian Reynolds, They were in no rush to trade Richard Rodriguez. Terrible job by the Braves. This won't help them make the playoffs. Great trade for the Pirates. They easily win this trade. Alright, so that's gonna do it for today. I want to get this show out in a timely manner. If anything else breaks, I'll talk about it on Monday. Monday night, you're going to get a New York Yankees show. Also, at some point in time next week, you're going to get an NBA free agency recap similar to what I did with the NHL. I don't know which day I'm going to do it. It could be Tuesday. It could be Wednesday. It could even be later than that. Keep an eye on my Twitter, @RealJacobValk. I'll try to announce it on this show. Also, one thing that I can guarantee is Monday's show will feature an interview with Tim Neverett. He's a Dodgers broadcaster who wrote a book on last year's Dodgers season. Very good book. Looking forward to talking to him. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk. And always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.